Good afternoon and or morning, YouTube. So, I am Fire Lotus. As you can tell, I am outside of my normal comfort zone and where I traditionally do these videos. But I wanted to jump on here and talk about something really quick because for the people who don't know, again, I'm Fire Lotus. I do witches morning chat lives on my Facebook page, Fire Lotus the Witch, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they can go anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to, I think it was last week or the week before last. I actually did one that went about 2 hours. But with that, I am currently I was talking to one of my students, and again, like I've stated in prior other videos, that the two students or the students that I will be taking on, I'm going to hopefully show them and develop the right techniques to let their natural abilities come out. Now, with that being stated, I'm going to kind of explain right now in my current life how I view where magic comes from, what is the source of that magic, and one of the reasons I've changed on what I used to say, which is how I talk about the gods and goddesses. Now, with this being stated, this is just my beliefs, everything like that. Take it, it's what you will. But I believe that at one point in time, when I first started my spiritual journey and my magical path of being a witch, I used to think that the gods and goddesses kind of were the source of that natural power, that the natural abilities that we have, and to be able to manipulate energy, to basically manipulate it enough to get the results that we wanted, or say that I wanted. Now, so I used to believe that you did have to worship them. You had to have an altar set up. You had to have this. You had to do this. You had to do this. You had to do that. And it also didn't help that when I came out, around the time that I came out of the broom closet, and I started openly practicing, and I started getting books and everything, primarily back then, the majority of the books were written by Wiccans. But the particular authors that written these, again, I have nothing against Wicca or Wiccans, but the way these authors or these particular authors wrote their stuff, it was basically, it came off as you either do it this way, the exact down to the T way in this book, or it's not going to work and it's going to fail and you shouldn't even be practicing magic. Now, of course, it did not actually state that. That was slightly paraphrasing. But a lot of them, and the majority of them, stated that you had to do it this way. If it didn't do it this way, it wouldn't work. That's bullshit. Complete and utter bull. Now, the reason that is, and how I learned this, was because I realized the more that I tried doing everything perfectly and by the book, the more I was losing touch with what I had originally discovered. And with that, I started questioning myself. I started doubting myself. When I was in the middle of a ritual or stating an incantation, if I fumbled or mixed my words up, I would stop the entire thing and start it all over again. Please don't do that. Do not do that. When it comes to in a ritual state, when it comes to practicing magic, or when it comes for you doing something, the number one thing you have to keep in mind, if you do specifically work with gods or goddesses, or if you don't, you have to keep in mind that they understand that we are humans. In other words, we are perfectly imperfectly flawed humans. Now, with that being stated, I also learned that you are supposed to laugh. if you mess up during a ritual, you are not supposed to take it serious, because the gods and goddesses aren't really taking it serious. They're taking it serious, but at the same time, it's not like they're taking it so serious they're going to punish you. But fast forward, my path has changed so much, and yours will too. I guarantee you. I originally started out Wiccan to a point to where, till this day, the Wiccan Law, I have it still memorized by heart. And that, for one, I want you to know that is okay. It is okay. I'm telling you, your first few years, I would roughly estimate, say the first 10, right? Your first 10 years, your path will change so many times it's not even funny. And with that, and with some of the ignorance that we have out in this day and age, you are going to have to, there will be some people that will be like, well, wait, a week ago you were saying you were this and now you're this. That's okay. That's the difference between spirituality and religion, which, true enough, technically Wiccan actually is a religion and not a spiritual path. It is a religious magic path. With that being stated, you do not have to be a witch to be a Wiccan, and you do not have to be a Wiccan to be a witch. And basically what that means is you do not have to practice magic to be a Wiccan, and you don't have to be a Wiccan to practice magic. Now, with that also being stated, even when I was younger, or when I was about 14, I was about 15. 15 is when I did my real, true, like, I had spent almost half a year prepping this sacred space that I had outside, that I had picked using a pendulum, like, I went through every magical step I could possibly do with this. And I will honestly say, when it comes to your tools, when it comes to anything magical that you use to assist you in your magic, if possible, make it by hand. When it comes to magical tools or magical tools, I believe that it works 10 times better if it's made by hand. Now, with that, again, it does not have to look all fancy and everything like that. But when I was doing these circles and rituals and spells and stuff, true enough, I was reading the books, but when I went outside, which is where I practiced the majority of my rituals, I would get this I almost call it like a magic mind in a way, or a ritual mind, but I also call it magic sight. Now, the reason I say this is because when I get in this zone, or get in this mind state, I can walk up to plants, and it's like I feel their vibration. And depending on how that vibration is depending on if I will use that in my ritual. Now, take in mind, I was 15, 16 while I was doing this. I was still fairly new. I started researching and studying the craft around 11 and a half, going on 12, and then at 13, I actually fully started to practice. But when I would do this, after everything was said and done with the ritual and everything, I would go back, and if I could actually identify the plant that I used, I would look up the magical correspondences with it. Now, this one particular incident that I'm about to speak of is literally the backbone behind my belief. And the reason that is because I realized that the plants that I was using, their correspondences were the exact same correspondences that were in the book. But prior to me reading that, I did not know that. And I realized something. I was like, well, wait, this stuff is naturally coming to me. Now, with that being stated, as I got older and my path started changing, I have these little oddities about me. I will collect random sticks, random rocks, random herbs, a lot of random stuff. And if you were to put it all in one box, none of it would make sense. But I've actually realized, especially in the past 2 years, because I've started getting into hoodoo and root magic and folk magic and Appalachian magic, and I'm realizing that a lot of the stuff that I do on a regular day basis, it's actually part of that. Now, with that also being stated, I've also been practicing and I have done research in shamanism. To anybody who sees this, if you want to know the number one book series or the number one book that I would tell you to get for starting off, would be Christopher Penczak's The Temple series. Look that up. I promise you, you will love him. He is an amazing author. He doesn't complicate stuff, and even the complicated stuff, he brings it down to where anybody, I almost said at any age, but anybody who is like a young adult and up or a teenager should be able to understand it perfectly. But with this, or actually, no, last year, sometime last year, no, actually this year, earlier this year, I received a book, and I can't remember the exact name, and since I'm not at home, I can't tell you. I will post it in the comments below though, but it's a shamanism book. It's a book on shamanism, but it's not their actual practices, it's their techniques. The author who created this book, he wanted to figure out a way that he could, at the very end of the day, just teach people the core techniques behind the practice of shamanism. That way you're not taking from other religions, but you're taking from shamanism, but you're also respecting how you're doing it. With that, and through all the things that he went through up until the point where he became a teacher himself, and when he started teaching people, they all quoted one thing. Again, they would word it differently, but at the end of the day, it reaches back to this, which is, it was like I was unlocking knowledge that I already had in me. Now, for someone who doesn't quite understand what that means, basically what that means is when they started learning these techniques, these meditations, and all this other stuff, they realized that all of this knowledge came to them very easily. And it was almost as if they were remembering a very, very distant past. Now, what is extremely interesting about this is in the last 5 years, I believe, I could be wrong on that, in the last 5 years, scientists have actually found out and discovered that through our DNA, memories, in a way, is passed down. Now, what that means is ancestors, say the people who are great-great-great-grandparents who went through the Great Depression, there are certain things due to the fact that their bodies had to, get used to what they were eating and stuff like that, that even in 2 generations down, some of the things that they would do or something like that, it basically, we replicate that in characteristics. Some of the things that we're attracted to, some of the foods we're attracted to, some of the countries and other places and things that we're extremely drawn or attracted to, but yet in this life, we really don't have a reason of why this is. The reason that is you are naturally tapping in to your ancestral magic, your ancestral energy. And through that is also how I've recently, which is because at one point in time in my craft, I think it was actually about 22. So about 4 or 5 years ago. But around 22 and 23, I started realizing, wait, I keep getting these books, I keep getting this knowledge, but it's not giving me a positive effect. If anything, it's damaging me because it's making me question everything that I'm doing. It wasn't until I got that book, that shamanist book, and I read that and I realized, oh shit, wait. I've been doing real magic from the very first day that, basically what I'm saying is a lot of the things that I'm drawn to, a lot of the things that I have always surrounded myself with or always brought into my life, but I never understood the connections to. And still, there are some of them that I do not. For example of that, I kind of get 3 and tie them in. I've always been drawn to the Flor de Lis symbol. I never knew why. Keep this in mind. Always been drawn to that. I've always been drawn to the sacred lotus. And when we're talking about deities and deities and gods and goddesses, I've always been drawn to Hecate or any other three-faced goddess, Mother, Maiden, and Crone. Always been drawn to that. Never realized why. It wasn't until about 2 years ago that I actually realized that the fleur de lis, not only in magic, can represent, or it can be presented as a representation of Mother, Maiden, Crone, the three-faced goddess, but get this, mind blown, it's also a symbol for the lotus. So think about that. I've always surrounded myself with these symbols even before I even practiced magic, only to find out years later that it was magic. And with that, it's also the herbs. I know there are certain subjects and stuff I can be talking with people and stuff will just blurt out of my mouth. And it's historically, or, it's correct. And what that is basically you are tapping into not necessarily the universal knowledge, but that too. But I also believe you are tapping into your ancestral knowledge. Now, since I've been talking about ancestors, I know you're already going to be like, well, I have family members and they were Christians and, or they were Catholics or they were, this, they were that. They did not believe in the occult. They did not believe in witchcraft. They did not believe in magic. How can I honor them if, because in the living, that would be like a major insult. That's the key. You have to realize and always keep in mind that when we leave this physical world, we also leave those human ties, that ego, all this stuff that makes us human, but also it separates us from being truly enlightened. That all gets left behind. So think about it not more as, oh, this is going to be disrespectful. Think about it as they will love it just for the simple fact that is a way to remember them constantly. Just have one single candle. You don't even need an altar, which I've already made a video about this. If you want to work with your ancestors and commune with your ancestors, but do not feel like you are called to magic, you can. Get a small table. Get a picture frame. Actually, due to a podcast that I was listening to earlier this week, if you want to do the ancestral thing, get a digital picture frame, and that way you can have all of your ancestors, as many pictures as you can get on a repeated loop. But what that is, or why, if you don't want to do that, have one specific candle set aside somewhere in your house for your ancestors. Now, what that is, or the reason I'm saying that, is because that means that every single time you buy this specific candle, it has the intent of every single time it's lit that you are remembering your ancestors. Now, with that, your ancestors will love it. Now, you will have some ancestors that you're not going to feel their presence or anything like that. That I'm still working on. But a lot of the times, and in my experiences and other experiences that I've heard from other practitioners, is they love it just for the simple fact you are remembering them, which means they may not be in our physical world anymore, but since you're lighting that candle every day or every other day or every week, or say there's one day out of every week, out of every month that you light it on, that is still honoring them. That is making sure their memory and their legacy lives on. And through that as well, this ties into my 30-day spiritual challenge that I also have a video up on my channel, here on my channel. The longer and the more you do this with your ancestors, it helps them and you both set up a dialogue and a way of communication. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean you're going to light a candle and you're going to have a house full of ghosts talking to you. I don't mean that. What I mean is you will get more spiritual results. Now, what I mean by that particular is, do this with me here recently. I've been having two specific ancestors that have been coming to me. Now, how I associate these, and you're going to be like, well, okay, if they're not going to talk to me, then how am I going to get the answers? Have you ever, say there was a perfume or cologne or an aftershave that your grandfather and or grandmother wore, and for no reason at all, you randomly smell that in your house? That is spirit's way or your ancestors' way of saying, hey, I'm here. I am around you. My presence is near you. Now, with me, almost every time I do this, I will have, my aunt loved a herb. And due to that she always used this herb when me growing up, some of my fondest memories is that smell mixed with pumpkin spice. We would always go to her house for Thanksgiving. So, and this particular herb, they don't make anymore. Not like this. So it has a very old school smell to it. There have been some days where I've lit a candle or I was just talking to them and I'll walk into another room and my entire house is smelled like it.